Hello and welcome to this round 15 of Grand Prix Lille. Carlos Morale on Jeskai control, Andrea Mengucci, the 12th ranked player in the world from Italy, on Golgari midrange. Mengucci, one of the players who has had spectacular success at the Pro Tour. World Magic Cup is very much his comfort zone, but somehow or other Grand Prix have not necessarily treated him quite so kindly, and as we go into the final round here, he needs to get just one more match win if he's going to lock up a top 8 place here in Lille, France. The first play of the turn is his in terms of a Jade Light Ranger, but Essence Scatter stops that one. Opt, of course, from Carlos Morale, potentially improving his draws slightly, but for now his Jeskai control list, which looks like an Izzet control list, is just going to have to sit back and counter the threats coming from Mengucci, as Vraska also getting dealt with here by Sinister Sabotage.
Yeah, very crucial for Carlos Morale not falling back in the early turns, countering the first two threats from Andrea Mengucci. The best thing that can actually happen when you're playing a control deck is that you reach the mid-game on an even level, and then you should be winning the late game because your cards are a little bit better. Although in Golgari midrange we know Carnage Tyrant is still a pretty potent late game as well.
Yeah, for Mengucci there is the potential to find some sort of acceleration to get a Carnage Tyrant out a little bit sooner. A lot of these green-black lists have quite a few accelerants. Thus far we've not seen any of that from the Italian player. This might be... No. Carlos Morale still has full lockdown on each and every permanent that Andrea Mengucci has tried to deploy. Find has managed to get back to those creatures though, so not necessarily the end of the world for Mengucci here, as he's able to continue to throw out threats, and sooner or later something is going to have to stick.
Yeah, that find was a lot of value right there. Getting back both of these Jade Light Rangers is so much value. Carlos has used 2 Essence Scatters to get rid of these Jade Light Rangers, and now they will be back in one single turn. And Carlos Morale had the opportunity there. 5 lands, nothing on the board. Would have been the perfect moment for Teferi, but nope. He just has to say go, and he will have to just be happy with the chemistry inside. But I think I'd rather be on Andrea Mengucci's side of the board right now. I do like more casting 2 Jade Light Rangers when compared to just a single chemisters inside.
Now, an interesting decision got made by Andrea Mengucci there, which was he revealed Carnage Tyrant to one of his Jade Light Rangers and elected to put that into the graveyard. Now, on the face of things, I would assume that a resolved Carnage Tyrant is about one of the best things you can possibly do against Jeskai control. What might be his reasoning for putting that one in the graveyard?
Well, Andrea Mengucci had only 5 lands, so he really wanted to play that second Jade Light Ranger this turn. Might have been that he did not have a 6th land. Also, if he leaves that Carnage Tyrant on top, and Jade Light Ranger will be a 4-3, his second Jade Light Ranger might as well be a 4-3, but it's not drawing him any extra cards. It's just leaving that same Carnage Tyrant on top, and if it's a 4-3, it still dies to Deafening Clarion. So I think he just wanted to get some more value from his future explorers.
So we saw Deafening Clarion dealing with both those Jade Light Rangers. Still more exploring going on from Mengucci here, who also has to stare down a Search for Azcanta on the other side of things that will be transforming this very next turn. And another copy of Find. This might be the other reason for putting Carnage Tyrant into the Grumper there, because it is able to get back the Carnage Tyrant along with another Explorer. And Mengucci here, even though there have been answers coming from Carlos Morale to much of what he's got going on, he's still got a big old grip of cards at this stage of the game.
Yeah, these double Find have been very good for him. Now getting back the Carnage Tyrant and the Jade Light Ranger, another reason maybe why he put the Carnage Tyrant in the graveyard, because he was going to take it back anyway. Carlos Morale does get to flip the Azcanta, so getting him the 6th land, putting Teferi in the graveyard, a little bit surprising to me.
Now, to me it feels like we might have Carlos Morale here trying to shape up to find some mass removal. If he's looking to cast any of the big white sweepers, he might be in trouble, because by the looks of things here, he's got lots of Sulphur Falls, an island, only 1 white source at present though, and that could be a big problem for him. It takes a small hit this turn, but it's the big hits that are coming soon that are going to be the concern. Carnage Tyrant is in hand for Andrea Mengucci. He's got enough mana to be able to get it down here, and Carnage Tyrant very, very difficult to answer in a 1-for-1 kind of way.
Yep. One of the ways is, of course, the white sweeper, Cleansing Nova, but I don't see any in Carlos Morales' deck. Seems like he's counting on his Deafening Clarions to sweep the board. There we have Cleansing Nova, maybe in the sideboard. No, he's actually counting on Star of Extinction in the sideboard, which is a pretty a card that has really stood up this weekend. It's shown a lot of his power with dealing with Carnage Tyrant.
Who'd have thunk it? The card that's all about the dinosaurs all dying is good at killing one of the really big dinosaurs. Flavor win there for Star of Extinction, even if it's only going to come out of the sideboard here for Carlos Morale, who does now find his second white source there in a Clifftop Retreat. So for now, Andrea Mengucci very much in the driver's seat. He has, let's look at this now, 4, 5, 12 damage on the battlefield, just on the face of things. If he can find just a little bit more, he can represent a one-turn clock here on Carlos Morale. Carlos going to have to do something here in order to keep pace with what Andrea Mengucci has going on. Three mana being tapped, and interesting. So that was a Deafening Clarion being copied by Expansion. The expansion half of Expansion Explosion, meaning that even when normally Deafening Clarion would not be enough to deal with a Carnage Tyrant, in that instance, Carlos Morale was able to sort of piece together his own Star of Extinction, even in the main deck, meaning that Andrea Mengucci here having to rebuild, casting another Jade Light Ranger before, what's the follow-up? All right, there's a Midnight Reaper. Just each and every card from this Golgari mid-range deck representing lots and lots of value. In some respects, it reminds me a little bit of the Teamer energy lists, where it wasn't as if any one card was what was winning you the game. It was just the fact that each and every card was getting you small incremental advantages, and those advantages adding up over time.
Yeah, interestingly, Carlos could have just double Deafening Clarion, but he chose to keep the second Deafening Clarion because he knew there was the Midrange Reaper coming, and he knew maybe next turn I'll need it. Next turn my Expansion Explosion won't be that good. I'm going to use my expansion now and then keep the Deafening Clarion for this turn.
So Crackling Drake comes along. That Crackling Drake will be substantial in size and potentially taking a turn off Deafening Clarion, because there's the nice combination for Jeskai control of cast Deafening Clarion with both abilities, give that Crackling Drake lifelink. It's got 4 toughness, so it survives the Clarion, and it can get a big hit in and gain back a lot of life for these control decks. As things stand, Vraska's defeat getting hit by a Disdainful Stroke there. 4 mana, meaning that it is a viable target for the counter magic.
Yeah, Vraska's Contempt, a card not showing up in that high numbers, usually like 1 or 2 copies in Golgari midrange, but still very good. Dealing with Arclight Phoenixes forever, dealing with Crackling Drake, dealing with Planeswalkers if needed. Interesting move here by Andrea Mengucci, running that Midnight Reaper into the Crackling Drake. I'm a bit surprised because Carlos is still at 10 life after this attack. I feel like the attack with just Jade Light Ranger and the guide would have been a little bit better.
Yeah, it seems to me like that may have been a rare misstep from Andrea Mengucci. He could potentially have got more value in, though I suppose that was the attack that dealt the most damage to Carlos in the short term. Let's see what our follow-up is here. There's the Deafening Clarion. He does indicate that he's using both modes. And this is the big play that is going to get him a lot of lives. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that this is an attack for 11 or 12 here. Wasn't quite able to get the count there, but we will see soon enough as these life totals change substantially.
Now that I've gained 12 life, I can take 2 from the Sacred Foundry. Vivian Reed is a good answer to Crackling Drake, but nope, Wizard Sabotage.
And Andrea Mengucci just has to scoop them up. A big swing there from Crackling Drake, ultimately enabled the win there for Carlos Morale. Good play from Carlos, able to deal with the otherwise potentially troublesome Carnage Tyrant thanks to the combination of Expansion and Deafening Clarion. Very tempting, of course, when you've got a lot of lands in play to look at the explosion half of Expansion Explosion and think, well, we've hit the stage in the game where that's the only important mode. But you know what? You got to use every piece of the buffalo if you're going to make a Grand Prix top 8, and Carlos Morel doing exactly that as these players go to their sideboards.
If I have to name the top 5 cards of the tournament at this point, Crackling Drake would be in there, Carnage Tyrant would be in there, Arclight Phoenix would be in there, and then there's 2 slots which I have to give some thought about. I don't know, maybe Find Finality has been pretty good as well.
I've enjoyed Expansion Explosion a lot as well.
Yep.
I must say that I like the way that it transitions from the early game into the late game. There are definitely occasions where I've seen it used on all sorts of different spells to double up that have been interesting, and then the power of it in the late game cannot be denied.
Yep.
It functionally feels somewhat akin to a Sphinx's Revelation of sorts. It's an instant speed way of drawing a lot of cards, but the damage that it deals is also not irrelevant. You can potentially get through for a lot of damage with Expansion Explosion, and it makes for a very clean transition from card drawing into actually winning the game for these red-blue control lists.
Yeah, and the copying has shown up quite a lot, to be fair. We've seen a lot of Deafening Clarions being copied by it. We've seen some counter wars where Expansion would copy a counter from your opponent for 2 mana, so basically acting as another negate. We've seen a Justice Strike just being copied to just destroy 2 creatures. It really is, both modes are being used. I have been indeed also enjoying the card.
Yeah, there's some interesting ones in Carlos Moral's list that I wouldn't necessarily expect to see in every build. He has 4 copies of Revitalize in his main deck, which is certainly not something that I've seen from every Jeskai control list, though it seems to have been working rather well from him. And then out of the sideboard, we've already mentioned the Star of Extinction. He's also got Legion Warboss, so he has the potential to move into a slightly more aggressive role if he so chooses in particular matchups.
Yeah, the Revitalize, obviously a concession to the mono red decks, but these decks have not been performing. They are just not very well positioned against the green-black decks. Maybe when green-black is on the decline and Jeskai control, Is It Phoenix will show up in higher numbers, I think we'll see a return of the mono red decks, and I wouldn't be too surprised if that was for the upcoming Pro Tour. One thing I've noticed, for example, with the Is It Phoenix decks is that it's really hard to beat mono red, because they have shock, they have aggressive creatures where you don't have that many sweepers, especially in game 1, and your Phoenixes are never going to raise an aggressive mono red opponent.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where the Jeskai lists and the other decks that are using Crackling Drake end up employing their spells, because Revitalize in here, it is one of those spells that you can always cast. It kind of cycles, it gains you a little bit of life, and it ticks the box of being another spell for Crackling Drake. Now, we've seen a lot of spells that have occupied that slot, and I don't think it's necessarily fully solved yet where the mix goes. I mean, we've seen Francesco Giorgio, who I believe is just outside the running for top 8 at this point. He's running a full set of Ionize in his list, where we see Sinister Sabotage in this list. I'm really intrigued as to these sort of finer detail points as to the exact decisions on spell slots, because bizarrely, even though this is a format where a lot of cards have been taken away, we've had full sets rotating out, it feels like there are good options at every point in the mana curve.
Yeah, I feel like if you're counting on Crackling Drake, then you want your counter to be Sinister Sabotage, because the 2 damage is less likely to matter, because your Crackling Drake will be very big, so it's usually going to kill your opponent 2 or 3 hits. But the one where we saw 4 Ionize had the Phoenix, the 4/3 Phoenix, Rekindling Phoenix, and there the 2 damage actually matters more often.
Memorial to Folly on turn 1 from Mengucci, just a tapped Sacred Foundry there. And these Memorials, while they certainly provide late game power here, they do mean that Mengucci doesn't have any plays in these first couple of turns in the game. Starting things off with a District Guide there on turn 3. It's got its own value. It lets you search up a land or a gate early doors, but here we just see Revitalize. It's still in the deck after sideboarding, gaining 3 life, drawing a card for Carlos Moral, getting a spell into the graveyard.
It could be that he's running like 1 or 2 lands fewer, because he's got these cantrips, and so if you sideboard out all the Revitalize after sideboard, then you suddenly have a deck with too few lands, or maybe he just got like 2 or 3 Revitalize and he just happened to draw the single one left in the deck.
It's definitely one of the more interesting choices in the list. We're going to get a chance to see all of Carlos's hand here as a duress comes from Andrea Mengucci. Mengucci getting his pen and paper out. He wants to make sure that he can take note of the key cards in hand there. Looks like we've got Opt, Essence Scatter, Chemist's Insight, maybe even a couple of copies of that. A land at the very top of the hand there, just one card I can't quite make out. Disdainful Stroke, the additional one. So 2 lands, Disdainful Stroke, 2 Chemist's Insight, Opt, and Essence Scatter. Good mix of counter magic, card drawing, and of course those ever crucial lands.
Yeah, hard to tell what Andrea Mengucci will end up picking here. It all depends on his hand. If he's got a creature he wants to resolve, he'll take the Essence Scatter. If he's looking to resolve a big Planeswalker next turn, he might end up taking the Disdainful Stroke. Yeah, to me this signals that he's looking to resolve a Vivian Reed, for example, next turn, hoping that Carlos Morel will not find an answer in his top 3 cards.
Well, the Opt puts that card straight to the bottom on the scry and then draws a card. That an original Opt from Invasion. A card that's been around for a little while now and has been doing good work ever since it got reintroduced into Standard.
Interesting choice here for Carlos Morel. He could play the Crackling Drake, or he could just say go with Chemist's Insight. I'd say playing the Crackling Drake was not the best of ideas, because you kind of know that Vivian Reed is likely to come up because of how the duress played out. But
also,
then again,
if you play the Crackling Drake, you've given back almost full information about what's in your hand again, because it was the card that Andrea didn't see.
Yep. And you really don't want to see Vivian Reed -3, destroy the Drake, and Vivian Reed would still be at 2 there. Would have been a lot of value. I think he'd rather just dig deeper and hope to find an answer to the Vivian Reed, for example, in the form of Star of Extinction or Excellence Binding.
I mean, the matter of when to play Star of Extinction is a little bit of a question mark. Ideally, you want to get as much value as you can off it, blow up as many creatures as possible, but sooner or later that life total comes tumbling down. You can't afford to wait forever. For now, though, Carlos passing things back. He's not under too much pressure immediately. Vivian ultimately will die to the Star of Extinction, pretty much as high as her loyalty ever gets. Obviously, doesn't want her to get up to 8 and actually generate an emblem so that all of Andrea Mengucci's creatures are indestructible, but that seems a little optimistic, to say the least. Midnight Reaper. That will be the kind of card that does punish a Star of Extinction just a little bit. Let's Mengucci get cards back, but Carnage Tyrant, target acquired. Carlos Morel here, likely to carry on digging where he can. Opt, opt, opt. Doesn't like that one too much.
And Carlos Morel just has the wrong answers. He had Disdainful Stroke for the Vivian Reed, but that one got discarded by duress. Now he's got Essence Scatter, but doesn't work against Carnage Tyrant. It is all about playing the right threats at the right moment in this game so far.
And it must be said, though, that Carlos has drawn a lot of extra cards here. In terms of finding the answers he needs, he's got a better shot than most of us would have. He's got, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 extra cards drawn, plus a couple of scries off those opts. This is the way that you find the answers you need in good time. The question is, how much time does he really have left?
Just 2 attacks, 9. 2 times 9 is enough. And Andre is kind of well set up for the late game as well with his double Memorial to Folly. But what he's, of course, really hoping is that Vivian Reed can go to Ultimate. Although I do already see the expansion explosion, so I'd be surprised if that's going to happen. Is he thinking about playing that Crackling Drake? Yeah.
I mean, the Crackling Drake offers a reason for Vivian Reed to tick down rather than up.
Yep.
Because it does represent a big enough blocker that it can even... there's 6 spells in the graveyard, so yes, it can block and trade with a Carnage Tyrant.
Yeah, the Crackling Drake is indeed a way to prevent Andrea from going Ultimate on that Vivian Reed. Andrea might be hoping that his Ravenous Chupacabra will be enough, but I do believe there's an Essence Scatter. Yeah, he actually knows about from the early duress. So would be very surprised if we didn't see an Essence Scatter here.
And the Crackling Drake drew Carlos Morel into a Deafening Clarion, so we may see a very similar play to what came along in Game 1. Deafening Clarion plus expansion in order to deal with all of the creatures on Andrea Mengucci's side of the battlefield.
Yeah, so he takes 9 now. He goes to 8. So if Deafening Clarion happens, then Andrea doesn't have lethal anymore with his Carnage Tyrant.
Well, Deafening Clarion plus expansion would be enough to clear the board entirely apart from that Vivian Reed.
Yep, good point as well. Still no Star of Extinction, because that of course would be the best play right now. Destroying one of those Memorial to Folly and getting rid of all the Planeswalkers. Andrea Mengucci is gonna draw some cards though. Yeah, only 2, so he's not going for the expansion combo, or maybe he's just playing the second.
Playing 2 copies of Deafening Clarion. This way round, it means that Andrea Mengucci drawing 1 fewer card.
No, actually
it would always have been the same, wouldn't it? The copy would have resolved and then the regular one.
So, but now Vivian Reed is still ticking up and is giving Andrea Mengucci a lot of value. Probably able to find another Carnage Tyrant or a Jadelight Ranger. Both of them very good targets right now. Vivian Reed might actually be in the top 5 as well, because how else? It's not a creature, so it's a different threat, but it finds you the so powerful creatures you're running. Jadelight Ranger is so powerful, Carnage Tyrant is so powerful, and the perfect way to get them is Vivian Reed.
So Andrea Mengucci here, he's got a lot of lands and a lot to do with them all, because he has drawn a couple of cards off Midnight Reaper. He's been able to search up another creature with Vivian Reed. This is how he comes back from these persistent ways of removing lots of creatures, is just by playing still more creatures. Jadelight Ranger drawing a couple of lands there for Mengucci, who now fires off a Duress, gets to take either Sinister Sabotage or that Expansion Explosion.
Yeah, I think the Expansion Explosion is going to go. Perfect way of dealing with that Vivian Reed. And now Golgari Finebroker. Perfect turn here for Andrea Mengucci, using all of his lands, playing 3 very powerful spells, and leaving Carlos Moral with just a counter when he's about to play an uncounterable creature next turn.
Yeah, and Moral just has to pass things back here. Mengucci looking to close this one out, force the game 3 with enough time on the clock that he ought to be able to take the 2-1 win, even having succumbed in game 1.
Carlos Moral is going to draw 4 cards though. There are still double
Chemist's Insight?
Double Chemist's Insight in the graveyard, and if he finds a Star of Extinction, then the game is wide open yet again. He just got to make sure that he does not target the Memorial to Folly, because that one will get sacrificed and then the spell will fizzle.
It's a good point. It is a targeted spell with only 1 target, so if you use a Star of Extinction and then the target on it does not resolve, or is not there at the point it would resolve, the whole spell is countered upon resolution. 20 damage to each creature and each Planeswalker. Worth noting that while from a flavor perspective the players count as Planeswalkers, from a rules perspective that is not the case. Midnight Reaper coming down again for Andrea Mengucci. It's going to be very difficult for Carlos to take these threats off the battlefield without Mengucci just getting to refill his hand each and every time.
Yeah, countering the Midnight Reaper here would actually decline, would actually mean that Andrea Mengucci doesn't draw 3 cards if Carlos Moral finds a sweeper. But does he actually? He finds Negate and Deafening Clarion, so still no sweeper. He really has to draw that Star of Extinction right here. Second Chemist's Insight is going to get jump started. Let's take a look for this turn. 2 more draws. I think that second Deafening Clarion. Oh, it's a Lightning Strike and a Rahl Viceroy.
All right, off the top, this is where it needs to be. An opt, that's another spin of the wheel, as we call it. Desperate times here for Carlos Moral. That one does not do it. Just 2 copies of Star of Extinction that must assuredly have come in from the sideboard, but no. Andrea Mengucci, consistent pressure from the Golgari mid-range deck. Enough to square things up at 1 game apiece. And we, ladies and gentlemen, are going to a game 3 here as these players vie for a top 8 spot.
Yeah, and Andrea Mengucci was able to apply this much pressure despite losing so many creatures just because of Vivian Reed. He was finding the right creatures, because looking at the top 4 every turn, picking the best creature there is in there is just so powerful. I don't think he would have been able to do this without the help of the powerful Planeswalker. He was losing 3 creatures to Deafening Clarion. He was... some of these creatures were getting countered, but Vivian Reed proved to be too powerful.
So each guy going to their sideboard now with the intention of making some small spot adjustments before we get to our game 3. Some of this will be about what they've seen from their opponents. Other elements could simply be just down to who's on the play, who's on the draw. Each of these sideboards with a lot of different options. This is not the kind of format where we're seeing lots of sort of 4-4-4-3 type sideboards. Lots of one-offs in each of these sideboards to make small spot adjustments to improve decks. And given the amount of card drawing, the amount of card selection in each of these lists, that's not necessarily so surprising. It means that you just have potential answers to more things.
Yep. Andrea Mengucci has a singleton Carnage Tyrant to supply his 3 copies in the main deck, and definitely I'm positive this one will be in the main deck right now. Vraska Relic Seeker, it seems like a powerful Planeswalker, but I'm not sure if he brought that one in. It is a way to deal with problematic enchantments like Ixalan's Binding, but it does get countered by pretty much everything, by Disdainful Stroke, by Negate, by Sinister Sabotage, so I'm not 100% sure he brought that one in. For Duress is pretty much the best card you can bring in this matchup. Apart from that, maybe Assassin's Trophy as a way to deal with Teferi, but I don't think that's how he wants to win that fight. He would rather kill it by attacking.
And in the sideboard of Carlos Morale, he has a variety of different counter magic that he can potentially bring in. Disdainful Stroke, Essence Scatter, more negates. He can also potentially bring in Seal Away and Invoke the Divine as ways of exiling things. And then there is that Star of Extinction. In total, so many cards that seem sort of enticing in terms of what's going on. But he needs to be careful to make sure that he doesn't over-sideboard, that he's not sort of messing with the overall structure of how his deck operates too much, making it so that maybe he's not got quite as much card drawing as previously he had, so that he can't reliably find these sideboard answers. These guys just finishing up their shuffling now, each on 12 and 2, to give you an update on what that means for them in the tournament at this stage. Essentially, it's very, very simple. If they win, they're in the top 8. If they lose, or indeed if they draw, they're almost certainly out.
Yep.
If they lose, they're definitely out. If they draw, it seems likely that that will also not be good enough.
In case you missed the top players, Javier Dominguez is doing very well. Raul Porojan, Christopher Larsen, and Florian Trotte. These are the 4 players at 37 points. We do not have the results of them yet, but we could assume that at least one of these 4, at least 2 of these 4 have drawn into the top 8, and the other one might be playing it out. And then we have a bunch of 36 players playing for the top 8.
Yeah, the match that we're going to be having after this one, Time Walked in its entirety, is the intention certainly, is that the match for Gabriel Nassif. Nassif playing against Peter Koenig is going to be playing again for top 8. He's in a very similar position to these 2 gentlemen, and with his mono blue list, he will be looking to put himself in a position to get yet another trophy. These guys just looking at opening hands, deciding if they like what they see. And it seems like we're going to be off to the races as Carlos Morale kicks things off just with a tapped land. Memorial Folly coming from Andrea Mengucci. Each of these guys just shoring up their mana in the early turns of the game before ultimately casting their first few spells. An opt here coming from Carlos Morale. Looking at the top card of his deck, he can decide if he wants to put that one on the bottom or if he wants to draw it. Down to the bottom it goes. And then draws further turn. All of the counter magic of Carlos Morale now online if he wants it. Midnight Reaper, the first threat coming from Andrea Mengucci, and that meets an Essence Scatter.
Yeah, apart from countering, it's very hard to trade one-to-one with the Midnight Reaper. Lava Coil is another way of dealing with it without losing on the card draw, without your opponent drawing an extra card, but I don't think Carlos Morel has Lightning Coil in the deck.
Chemist's Insight there, meaning that he can get up on cards in his own little way. There's Jumpstart for that one, so potentially we'll see it again sometime relatively soon.
Yeah, this is not a good sign for Andrea Mengucci. Having to say go on turn 4 without a play, and now turn 5 as well. Uh-oh. He must be heavily leaning on Carnage Tyrant. Yeah, I see
at
two
least
copies,
one in the hand, yeah.
And a Vraska. But I would be very surprised if he goes with the Vraska first. I think you just want to apply as much pressure as possible with these Carnage Tyrants.
But of course, for now, because he's not piling out threats, that means that there's time for Carlos Morel to play all of his card drawing spells. Chemist's Insight playing it and flashing it back because there's simply not been as many threats coming from Mengucci in the early game as might be required to force Carlos Morel to be doing anything else with his mana. So the amount of cards that Carlos has already seen this game is substantial, meaning that he has the potential to find his key answers, even to a card like Carnage Tyrant, which typically does not have very many answers in the format. 6 mana, first Carnage Tyrant deployed. I think that there is already a Star of Extinction in Carlos Morel's hand here. His Search for Azcanta means that he gets to dig still deeper. Ultimately elects to draw that one. And are we going to see the star immediately? We are. He blows up a tapped Memorial to Folly while he has the opportunity to. Kills off the Carnage Tyrant. But if there's another Carnage Tyrant coming along the very next turn, it may be that Carlos was being a little bit trigger happy there.
Yeah, the question is, Andrea Mengucci probably knows about Star of Extinction, so was he even gonna commit to the board? But in the meantime, Andrea Mengucci uses this window. Carlos Morel is tapped out, and he plays his Vraska. Good answer by him there, destroying the Search for Azcanta in the process. Very important move there.
Now, there was one Lightning Strike in the main deck in Game 1. Whether or not that's going to hang around by the time we hit Game 3, there's a Vraska with 3 loyalty, so it would be a lovely answer if he has it, but just passes things back, meaning that Mengucci going to be able to extract some value from his 6-mana Planeswalker here.
Yeah, and now Carlos Morel, he does have the Sinister Sabotage, but that one won't be able to counter Carnage Tyrant. In the meantime, Vraska is going to gain, once again, so much value. Star of Extinction was the perfect answer to the first Carnage Tyrant, but now he will need a second one if he wants to answer this one.
And by a second one, we mean the second one. There's only 2 copies of them in total in Carlos Morel's deck.
Well, turns out you only need 2. Destroying Overgrown Tomb and getting rid of Vraska. That's a devastating play.
And the thing is that Mengucci does have more copies of Carnage Tyrant than Carlos Morel has ways of dealing with it. So in some respects, he can kind of sit on his heels a little bit now. He knows that 2 copies of Star of Extinction are gone. How many of them was there ever going to be space for in Carlos's deck? These guys aren't working with deck lists, but it seems like it would be a bullish choice to have a full 4 Star of Extinction, surely.
Yeah, this is not the Naya Ram deck. Naya Ram deck does run a couple more, but indeed, in Jeskai control, usually 2 or 3 is the answer. And now another nice follow-up by Andrea Mengucci. This game has gone back and forth. Hard to tell who's going to win. Carlos Morel had 2 very powerful Star of Extinctions, but Andrea Mengucci always coming up with the right answer the turn after.
Vraska Golgari Queen there, choosing to turn some golden treasure into stone and then giving some life and indeed drawing a card. Up to 8 loyalty now. At some point at 9 loyalty, it makes Andreas Mengucci's creatures incredibly scary. A lot of mana available to Carlos Morel, but looking at his hand, he's not really got that much to do with it. He's got lands in hand and a Deafening Clarion, and the Clarion not a great answer to at least the Planeswalker of Andrea Mengucci.
The problem is that Mengucci's deck is just built very well for the late game. 4 Carnage Tyrant, a lot of powerful Planeswalkers, and Carlos Morel doesn't have all that many powerful late game cards. He's really looking for Expansion Explosion here, or a Teferi. And now Vraska is gonna tick up to 10, threatening an emblem next turn.
And the emblem, of course, means that even though there's just a little 1-2 in play, 1 point of damage dealt to Carlos by one of the creatures that Vraska has bestowed with an emblem would be enough to close this game out. The token hit there for just a single point for now for Seeker Squire.
Will we see the weakest Deafening Clarion in the history of this tournament?
And we might have to.
Getting rid of one single Seeker Squire just because of the Vraska ultimate?
I mean, ideally, a blink of an eye or similar to deal with the Vraska would be a little bit more exciting, albeit temporarily.
Chemisters inside, that's a good start. Let's see what's on top. Revitalize and another Deafening Clarion. If he plays Deafening Clarion, he now he can flashback the Chemisters inside. So yeah, there we have it. Just because of the Vraska ultimate, Carlos Morel has to use that Deafening Clarion to kill a single Seeker Squire despite being at 19 life.
And Andrea Mengucci making the most of the fact that he has the opportunity to get that emblem. Now each and every creature from Mengucci is a lethal threat in terms of Carlos Morel's life total.
So now every creature turns Carlos Morel into a stone? Is that how it works?
Yes, I mean in previous iterations Vraska has dealt with assassin tokens. So in this case effectively she has turned the entire Golgari brood into assassins, all of whom have one target and one target only, that target being Carlos Morel.
Sweet. Now
That's a pretty good plot. I would watch that movie.
Yeah.
An army of assassins.
Carlos Morel can still win though, but he will have to answer every single creature from Andrea Mengucci. His life total doesn't matter anymore. One single point of damage from the creatures is enough. Combat damage, to be clear. So, for example, Niv Mizzet wouldn't seal the deal.
Yeah, these Revitalize is essentially just cards with cycling that dig Carlos a little bit deeper. I mean, to be clear, they wouldn't deal infinite damage, they would just cause Carlos to lose the game.
Yep.
In some respects, it's even worse.
Lose the game and end his hopes of top-8ing this Grand Prix. That Vraska, these Planeswalkers have been very good. Jeskai Control doesn't have that many ways to deal with Planeswalkers, and it's coming to hurt Carlos Morel. He lost game 2 to Vivian Reed, and now he's taking a lot of damage. Well, not damage, but he's losing a lot of value to that Vraska.
Duress here meets a Sinister Sabotage. I like the fact that Mengucci, now that he's got the emblem, he's essentially just putting one creature out at a time, forcing Carlos to deal with it however he may.
Andrea Mengucci does have to be careful because one expansion explosion could turn this game around.
I mean, the expansion explosion would certainly do a lot of damage. Ravenous Chupacabra on a mission sent from Vraska to kill off Carlos Morel.
And the way he's laying these manas out, he did keep a card on top. Oh, it's actually Niv Mizzet. Does he have a Chemister's Insight in the graveyard? I think he's got another copy. So can he play Niv Mizzet? Yeah, he will still have plenty of mana to flashback that Chemister's Insight, have 3 pings, killing either the Chupacabra or the Vraska.
Drawing 3 cards.
Yeah.
And one has to think that if you draw 3 cards, a reasonable shot at finding a spell. Niv Mizzet, he looks so smug, that dragon. Is it for good reason?
That's one happy dragon, now that I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the look that you get in your face when even your opponent's spells are drawing you cards.
Yep. He's like, yeah, I got this.
the first moment, and I'm sure it happened to a lot of people at the pre-release, where you realize that even your opponent's spells draw you cards, and obviously in turn deal damage. It's a special time in Magic. We've all been there. I played against Niv Mizzet Perun. We got a chance to see a few cards during the World Championship, and yeah, Marshall drafted the Niv Mizzet Perun, and it turns out that yes, it is unbeatable. In limited, at least. This is going to be a tougher one, though, especially given that Vivian Reed does represent a way of dealing with the big flyer.
Not only a way, but also a way without allowing Carlos Morel to draw an extra card. It is not an instant, it is not a sorcery. Is Vivian Reed gonna close the door? There might not actually be another copy of Chemister's Insight.
Already 2 of them have been jump-started. If there's not a card-drawing spell, or indeed, I guess every spell is a card-drawing spell at this point, if there's not a spell available to Carlos Morel right now, then it could all be over.
There is.
Okay, he has got one.
But he is thinking about whether or not he should let that Vivian Reed resolve first, and then point some of the damage he's doing with Niv Mizzet at Vivian Reed. But it seems like he's digging for a counter instead. He's going to use the triggers. I'm guessing shooting Vraska once and twice Chupacabra.
Well, I mean, technically, initially you've got the trigger of Niv Mizzet. He still needs to find more spells. So definitely needs to kill off that Chupacabra just so that he's not going to be dead this very turn if and when Vivian Reed gets to kill Niv Mizzet.
So now 2 Planeswalkers at 2 and 4, but Carlos Morel did draw double Crackling Drake. This game is wide open. Anyone can win. Andrea Mengucci just needs 1 creature to be unblocked and deal damage to Carlos Morel. Carlos Morel will have to handle with these 2 Planeswalkers, but it seems like double Crackling Drake might be what he's looking for. It might actually be enough to just kill Andrea Mengucci from 25 life.
And that would be very impressive indeed. There's a Teferi as well, so he could get rid of one of these Planeswalkers. This would be a huge turn up for the books if Carlos Morel can go from staring down Vraska's ultimate to attacking for the win in one fell swoop. It would be an auspicious way of making it into the top 8 here in Lille for this Grand Prix. Teferi ticking up.
Yeah, and he's still got Sinister Sabotage. I think he's got this.
There's a lot of spells between the graveyard and the exile zone. A tick up here for Andrea Mengucci. He gets to find a creature or a land. None of his creatures have haste, though. And we're going to get a count on a very fat graveyard looking at all of these spells.
13, 14, 15. Yeah, these Drakes are big enough to kill Andrea Mengucci in one single attack. Andrea Mengucci will have to kill at least one of the Drakes if he wants to win this match. He's got Vraska's Contempt, but that one will be countered by Sinister Sabotage. Does he have another cheap answer? Assassin's Trophy?
This has been a hugely back and forth match. Carlos Morel winning game 1 in comparatively straightforward fashion. Andrea Mengucci striking back in game 2 decisively. And now in this game 3, it looked like all was lost for Carlos Morel. 2 stars of extinction being used, but only getting kind of minimal value off each, really. And now, suddenly, with the 2 Crackling Drakes, he might just be able to close out in one go. There's a Find Finality on top of the deck. Vraska can still draw it, but I don't think there's going to be enough mana to be able to cast Finality here.
No. I think Carlos Morel has this. Vraska's Contempt will get countered. Carlos Morel has played this game wonderful. He was a little bit flooded in the beginning, but did get to turn around the game a little bit with Niv Mizzet. And then Chemister's Insight drawing into double Crackling Drake. Crackling Drake is just such a powerful creature. Good early, good late. Drawing you cards. Very impressed by this card so far.
So here is the attempt at Vraska's Contempt. There's the Sinister Sabotage. There's going to be a Surveil as well. Carlos Morel, though, he's got the damage he needs, and you can see there the huge sigh of relief from Carlos. That was not an easy game for him whatsoever, but he does pick up the win. And you see a small smile there, even from Andrea Mengucci. Mengucci has been around the block a few times. He knows how tight these matches can be. He did everything he could, but ultimately, 2 copies of Crackling Drake able to close that game out. Wowee!
That was
Crackling Drake representing a gigantic amount of damage, getting it done for Carlos Morale. Do not go anywhere, guys. Our final round of the Swiss is still going, and we're going to get a chance to watch a Hall of Famer in action after these messages. Hello and welcome back to coverage of Grand Prix Lille. I am Tim Willoughby, this is Moraine Lebert, and you know what? We have an absolute corker of a match for you as we head towards our top 8. This is, starting from the start, time walked away. We're going to get a chance to see Gabriel Nassif on Mono Blue Tempo against Peter Koenig on Is It Phoenix. Nassif has been doing great things with this tempo list all weekend long. Not too many people came along with it, even though it's a relatively known quantity in Standard already. If you can get the early Curious Obsession, you can do great work. But Is It Phoenix is the kind of deck that has, as we see here, the likes of Shock to deal with some of these early creatures, which might mean that Nassif has a rough matchup.
Yeah, turn 1 Shock on the Storm Tamer at least. Gabriel Nassif did not try to go with Curious Obsession, which he doesn't currently have. He does have Warcard Marauder or the Merfolk Trickster. Seems like he's looking at deploying one of these two.
I mean, the good thing about the Trickster, I suppose, is it has Flash, so you can afford to wait on it just a little bit, see what Koenig has going on.
Ooh, Drowned Secrets there from Peter Koenig, hoping to mill many Phoenixes as fast as possible. He is already holding one, so he won't be able to mill that one, but still 3 in the deck. Let's see what Gabriel Nassif can deploy this turn.
Yeah, the Drowned Secret's a really interesting one. Every time you cast a blue spell, you get to mill target player for 2 cards. And in this instance, Peter Koenig largely looking to use it to mill himself, get more Arclight Phoenixes in the graveyard, and power up everything that he's got going on.
Now, no third land for Gabriel Nassif. Will have to be happy just playing that opt. He might as well do it in his turn, because if he draws a land, I think he wants to play that one. Don't think there's a much value waiting with the opt.
I mean, also this would have been a fine turn to find a Curious Obsession, play it, get in, draw yet another card, and maybe get a land that way. Yeah, Peter, a lot of setup already in place. He will be able to get to Arclight Phoenixes a little bit more easily than a lot of these Is It Phoenix decks can. But obviously, it has come at the cost of a card. It's not as if he's just getting that for free. It's taking up space in his deck that other lists might be running with simply more instants to help trigger those Arclight Phoenix. Ultimately, another opt finding the third land that Nassif needs. Didn't really want to have to use 2 mana just to find his third land, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And here comes Goblin Electromancer, another way of turbocharging what's going on. Peter Koenig there, just putting 2 basic islands into his graveyard. Not exactly what he would have been looking for, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he's happy not drawing these 2 islands. He's already flooded quite a bit. 2 Wizard's Retort and the Warcard Marauder now. Does Gabriel apply more pressure, or does he hope to counter enough spells for this Merfolk Trickster to seal the deal? That doesn't seem very likely, but I don't think he, even if he adds a 2/1, yeah, this is a tough spot for Gabe.
I mean, I guess that the Warkite Marauder does trade with an Arclight Phoenix if one comes down this turn. This is a turn where we could easily see an Arclight Phoenix in one way or another, and it looks like it's the old-fashioned way here. 4 mana being tapped in order to cast the 3/2 Flying Haster.
I don't think Gabe is going to block if Peter attacks, but I think if Peter attacks, he also has to attack with the Goblin Electromancer, yeah. Does Gabe win this race? He goes to 15, puts him 12, 10. Yeah, Gabe loses this race, so he will need to draw another creature, but 1 Merfolk Trickster actually turns the race around, and he does still have enough counterspell. And look at that, the perfect draw right there. Tempest Djinn.
The 4 toughness, very important against these Arclight Phoenixes, means that it can happily block. It's also got 3 power on the front end, so it will kill off Arclight Phoenix all day long. But Peter Koenig, his deck, it must have a lot of spells because it's looking to trigger that Arclight Phoenix. If any of those spells represent removal, then Koenig could potentially get in for a lot of damage very quickly, and it will be at a reduced cost thanks to Goblin Electromancer.
Yeah, Crackling Drake now the best answer Peter could come up with. There is still the Warcard Marauder, so Gabe can attack 1 more turn with the Tempest Djinn. making the Drake a 1/1, but then the Arclight Phoenix will jump in front of the Warcraft Marauder.
I think that Peter may have forgotten to draw his card there with the Crackling Drake. He remembered to put the trigger on from Drowned Secrets, but I think that he may be due an extra card. This is a Time Walk match, so we can't get that one fixed up, but ultimately he may have given up a little bit of value there. The Crackling Drake doing a fair impression of Tempest Djinn right now. They're both 3/4s, though Peter Koenig's monster has the potential to get bigger a little bit quicker, I would estimate, than Tempest Djinn does. It's looking for islands. Crackling Drake is looking for spells in the graveyard, and spells in the graveyard is going to be easy to achieve for Peter Koenig.
This is a difficult decision for Gabriel Nassif. He's got Trickster and he's got 3 counters. How does he play this game? He can attack this turn, but he would only deal 3 damage. I don't think attacking is what he wants to be doing. Does he want to play the Trickster right there? Then he deals 5 damage. He could actually attack with the second Trickster as well, maybe dealing 7. That seems like a plan, but if he does that, he doesn't keep up mana to counter whatever Peter will try to do. So I think saying go is correct. Hoping that Peter doesn't have anything. Certainly happy to let this Goblin Electromancer resolve. I think
Especially
this is
as the Electromancer did not put any spells in the graveyard.
yeah, this is the perfect turn for Gabriel Nassif to deploy that second Merfolk Trickster. What he really is just hoping for is to draw another island in order to turn that Tempest Djinn into a 4/4. Ooh, another Trickster.
Ooh, this gets interesting now. Yeah, there's potential for an attack here from Gabriel Nassif. He also, having that Trickster means that he can play a little bit of defense as well.
Turns the Phoenix into a 1/1 with Warkite Marauder.
0/1, I believe.
0/1. And I believe it doesn't have flying anymore, if I remember correctly.
Loses all abilities.
Yep, there we see, cannot block the Tempest Djinn, so has to take 5, goes down to 7, and now Nassif ahead on board and keeping up mana to counter. And Peter Koenig, just another land.
So many lands for Koenig this game. He's put a lot in the graveyard with Drowned Secrets. He's drawn a lot of them. This has been a very tough draw for him, and that is enough for game 1. Gabriel Nassif just 1 game away from locking up yet another top 8, and thanks to the beauty of Time Walk Magic, we are straight on to game 2. But here, Nassif looks to be keeping a hand of just 5 cards.
Uh-oh. He will need Curious Obsession to get back into this game. He does have Sentinel Totem, one way of removing those Phoenixes, but his hand is quite weak.
We're just going quiet for just a moment here as they're announcing live on camera, live in the room, the top 8. We don't want to give away anything before we get to the end of this match. We'll be back shortly. All right, we're back in the room, and Gabriel Nassif finally finding his second land, but not before Peter Koenig is able to get a lot of velocity going. His Crackling Drake's already big, and this will be a big problem for the French Hall of Famer here. He reads the Crackling Drake carefully. Yes, it's drawing him cards. Yes, it is already a 5-power flyer.
And Sentinel Totem doesn't do much, as the Crackling Drake also counts the cards in exile. So even if Gabe would exile the complete graveyards from Peter Koenig, it would still be a 5/4 flying.
And Koenig still has more action here. A Lava Coil in order to potentially kill off one of these two creatures on the other side of things. Also, of course, pumping the Drake. Goes to combat, and a Merfolk Trickster, at least for now, keeping the Crackling Drake from hitting in.
The problem is that Gabe has no pressure going on. Peter is still at a healthy 15 life. Gabe is only dealing 1 damage a turn. He's going to add a second Mistcloaked Herald right here, and also a Trickster. So he's applying some pressure, and as long as Peter is once again heavy on lands, he might actually have a shot despite mulliganing down to 5.
I have been impressed with the Mono Blue Tempo list's ability to win out games when Curious Obsession and Tempest Djinn aren't major factors. However, it must be said it's much, much easier when one or both of those show up. But having tapped out, Gabriel Nassif now finds himself on the wrong side of Niv Mizzet Perun, and this could be a big problem for him, as he's got lots of creatures with low toughness, and you see it, yeah, he just scoops up his cards in the face of the huge dragon. Any amount of card drawing there wipes out his entire board. It's not going to take long to close it out, and we get to our game 3 here. So it looks like here it's Nassif keeping on a full 7, and on the other side of things, Koenig happy enough with his draws also. Siren Storm Tamer, the initial play for Nassif. He's going to be the first one getting damage through, one would imagine. And he's got lands, he's got Tempest Djinn. Does he have a Curious Obsession as well? Given that there's only an island in play on the other side, he might as well run it out there.
He does, but maybe he wants to chart a course, or even play a Warkite Marauder and wait for that one to... Yeah, I think I like playing the Warkite Marauder a little bit better, because you do have the Storm Tamer next turn to protect your Warkite Marauder if you enchant that one. Peter Koenig does find Shock and Lightning Bolt, so 2 very good draws from Peter Koenig.
So uses the Shock there while Gabriel Nassif's tapped out to make sure that he kills off the Warkite Marauder there, that he doesn't fall afoul of any kind of disruption from Gabriel Nassif's side of things. This does mean that he's just got the lone island up here. I mean, imagine how different this game would be if his first play had been a Steam Vents rather than an island. Having access to at least the threat of damage here would potentially change what Gabriel Nassif wants to do quite a bit. Just a swing up for 1 again here from Nassif.
I think he's going to play the Tempest Djinn, and if that one survives, and he's able to protect it with the Storm Tamer, that's going to be huge. He is giving it some more thought. He could also chart a course, draw 2 cards, and then next turn play the Tempest Djinn and protect it with the Storm Tamer, but he's losing out on a lot of pressure at that point.
2 copies of Arclight Phoenix in hand for Peter Koenig, so if he can find a way of discarding them, that will be huge. There we see...
Beacon Bolt on the Storm Tamer.
But that's used all of the mana available to Peter Koenig, so there will be some big swings here from Gabriel Nassif. How big, we'll find out shortly.
This is a tense game. Now Curious Obsession on the Tempest Djinn makes it a 5 toughness creature, doesn't die to Lava Coil anymore, and for Beacon Bolt to kill it, Peter would need a lot of instant or sorceries in his graveyard. I think I like putting the Obsession here and then chart a course, trying to find either Dive Down or Spell Pierce.
Big decision here for Gabriel Nassif. Nassif, pretty experienced with this deck. I know that he's been testing a lot of decks ahead of the Pro Tour in Atlanta. Does go with the Curious Obsession. I've liked the way that Nassif's been playing this game, putting down his threats comparatively aggressively, making sure he can maximize his damage. No additional land, unfortunately, here for Nassif, and that means that the Charter Course line a little scarier, because it may be that leaves his shields fully down.
Yeah, but for Peter to kill the Tempest Djinn with a bolt, he would need 2 more instant or sorceries in the graveyard, and that's going to be very hard with only 1 mana. This is a very tense game. Charter Course would dig him 2 cards deeper. 2 Opts would actually dig him 4 cards deeper.
So right now, I can let you know 7 of the top 8. Technically, I know 8 of the top 8, but I don't want to give away the result of this game because clearly this is one where the winner will make it into the top 8. So in 8th place, Christopher Larson got in. It ended up being a pretty clean cut in terms of points. He got in on 38 points. Javier Dominguez got in on 38 points. Etienne Busson on 39 points made it in. Then the winner of this match makes it in there. Alvaro Torresco Jimenez made it in on 39. Carlos Morral made it in, as we saw. And then Arne Huschenbeth and Florian Trotter, the final 2 that made it in. Trotter at the very top of the Swiss, so he will have the option to go first in each and every game. And then the winner of this match is our final member of the top 8. The top 8, of course, which we will be bringing you just as soon as this match is completed. So for now, Nassif's plan of protect the Djinn going rather well, it must be said. Arc-like Phoenix getting cast. In response, we're going to see an opt from Gabriel Nassif. I believe that he does already have a Wizard's Retort, but if he were able to find an Essence Scatter, that would be a slightly more exciting way of stopping it, though I guess that Peter is tapping out for the Arc-like Phoenix here.
Yeah, and Gabe has a 2-turn clock. He found a Trickster. He can tap down the Phoenix, get in for 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 with an island, leaving Peter at 2 life. I think it's fine to let this Phoenix resolve. And then next turn, hoping to draw another Trickster maybe, or more pressure in the form of Mistcloaked Herald, for example. Now Merfolk Trickster.
And you could see that Peter Koenig, before the Trickster even on the table, taps down his Phoenix as if he could see that that one was coming. And Curious Obsession has been picked up here, so that's potentially another point of damage. So we've got 4, 5, 6, 7. He can't quite get up to the 10 unless he were able to chart a course, pre-combat, find an island and another Curious Obsession. But as things stand, in great shape here, Nassif, to close this one out.
He could... Is the 1 damage he could potentially deal from the island worth it? I don't think it is. He is just going to Curious Obsession. Protecting his Djinn a little bit more.
Also drawing in more cards to rebuild if it works out that something does go horribly awry in the next turn or so.
He deals 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Deploys the Mistcloaked Herald. Actually, the 1 damage might be worth it. It would mean that the Mistcloaked Herald is lethal next turn, no matter what. But that's the perfect draw. Another Trickster. Now we can actually play the Mistcloaked Herald, keep up Wizard's Retort, and Merfolk Trickster. I think he's got this one going his way.
Yeah, this seems like a dominant board position. Not sure what Peter Koenig can draw here to be able to get out of it. Plays an island, taps a lot of mana, gets Niv Mizzet down, but there is the Merfolk Trickster, there is the handshake, there is our 8th member of our top 8 here at Grand Prix Lille. So, to reiterate, our top 8 is, in 8th place, Christopher Larson. In 7th, our world champion, Javier Dominguez. In 6th, Etienne Busson. 5 sees Gabriel Nassif. 4, Alvaro Torresco Jimenez. 3, Carlos Morral. 2, Arne Huschenbeth. And our number 1 seed, Florian Trotter. There you see the bracket. There you see what we are going to have in our next 3 rounds. Those next 3 rounds are not far off. But let's have a look at the final standings and see who just missed out there. It was a clean cut. Francesco Giorgio, he had taken a draw earlier on that meant that he could not quite make it in with his Jeskai control. Raul Porojan, another player on red-blue, 37 points. Christian Hauk, 36. Pascal Viren, sadly for Team Belgium, not making it to this top 8. Andrea Mengucci, not having the weekend that he maybe would have hoped for with that top 8 finish. Peter Viren, both the Viren brothers on 36 points, having to content themselves with the prize money, the pro points that come from that near miss. Even Jeremy Dazani there in the top 20 on 36 points. This a relatively stacked field, it must be said, but congratulations to the 8 that are still going to be competing as we hit our elimination stages. Really intrigued to see how these guys shape up now that we hit the elimination stages, now that full deck lists are available, because this has been a bit of a voyage of discovery for a lot of people when it comes to Standard. There are not a whole lot of Standard deck lists available just yet. We will have our deck lists up for the top 8 soon enough. The players will have the deck lists, the players will be playing off, and at some point relatively soon we will have our champion here at Grand Prix Lille. Do not go anywhere.